Ambassador Elena Reyes fought to keep her eyes open. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was designed to impress, with its soaring crystal dome and hovering platforms for each of the 37 member species. But after 6 hours of listening, to delegates discuss trade regulations for minerals she couldn't even pronounce, Elena was struggling to stay alert. Next item, Security Assessment Report for Sector 8, with special attention to recent military developments on Earth, announced the council speaker, a tall Meridian with shimmering blue skin. Elena sat up straight. Finally, something relevant to her position as Earth's ambassador. She arranged her digital notes and prepared to address the standard concerns about Earth's defense systems. This was routine. Every 5 years, each member world's military capabilities were reviewed to ensure compliance with council regulations. The Versith delegate rose from his floating platform. Ambassador Tskel was an imposing figure, nearly 8 feet tall with 4 tentacle-like arms that glowed faintly purple when he spoke. The chamber quieted as his deep voice echoed through the hall. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into standard. "Galactic Common, the Versith Confederation has observed with growing concern the rapid military expansion of Earth forces." Elena frowned. Earth's recent developments had been modest, mainly upgrading outdated defense platforms and adding 2 new patrol fleets to protect their outer colonies. "Our analysis shows that humans have increased their warship production by 43% in the past 3 years, continued Tskel, his tentacles pulsing brighter. "They have developed new weapon systems capable of planetary bombardment and have conducted no fewer than 12 large-scale war games in neutral space." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Elena made notes, preparing to explain that the planetary bombardment systems were actually terraforming equipment with minimal military applications. "But most concerning," Tskel's voice grew louder, "is not just what humans do, but what they are. Our cultural analysts have studied their history extensively. For 3,000 years of their recorded history, humans have engaged in nearly constant warfare among themselves." Holographic images appeared around the chamber: ancient human battles, modern conflicts, military parades, and weapons testing. Elena recognized many of the images as being centuries old, taken completely out of context. "Even their entertainment glorifies conflict," continued the Versith. A scene from a popular human action movie played briefly. "They train their young for combat through simulations they call games." The image of children playing a virtual reality space battle appeared. The chamber grew tense. Many species in the council had evolved beyond violent conflict thousands of years ago. Some, like the Eloth, hadn't engaged in warfare for over 10,000 years. The evidence is clear. Tskel's tentacles were now bright purple with emotion. Humans are fundamentally war-fearing creatures. They see threats everywhere, prepare constantly for conflicts that exist only in their minds, and bring their violent tendencies wherever they go. Elena's hands tightened into fists under the table. This wasn't a standard security review. It was an ambush. The Versith Confederation proposes immediate sanctions on human military expansion. For the safety of all peaceful civilizations, we must contain this species until they evolve beyond their primitive fixation on warfare. Other delegates began to signal their desire to speak. The Torani representative, a large insectoid creature, clicked her mandibles excitedly. "The Torani Collective supports these concerns," she said. "Since joining the council, humans have constructed defense stations on every one of their colonies. What peaceful species needs so much protection?" Next came the Zalaxian delegate, his holographic form shimmering with disapproval. "Humans spend 16% of their planetary resources on military preparation. The galactic average is 3%. These are not the priorities of a species ready for advanced galactic cooperation." One by one, delegates rose to condemn humanity's military posture. Some cited specific concerns about Earth's new technologies, while others spoke broadly about humanity's aggressive nature and barbaric history. Elena watched in disbelief as these advanced species, many of whom had enjoyed peace for millennia due to their isolated positions or natural defenses, smugly condemned her species for taking precautions in a dangerous galaxy. The Meridian Council. Speaker raised a slender blue hand. We will now vote on the Versith proposal to impose sanctions on human military expansion. Elena quickly pressed her communication button. Point of order, she said, her voice steady despite her anger. The representative of Earth has not been permitted to respond to these accusations. Of course, the speaker nodded. The Council recognizes Ambassador Elena Reyes of Earth. The chamber fell silent as Elena rose from her seat. The other delegates expected a diplomatic retreat or a meek apology, standard responses from newer council members when faced with criticism from the older, more established species. Instead, Elena took a deep breath, her dark eyes flashing with barely contained fury. The room's automated systems detected her elevated heart rate and projected a subtle red glow around her platform. The Council's way of indicating emotional speech was forthcoming. Honored delegates of the Galactic Council, Elena began, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. I have listened patiently to your characterization of my species as warmongering savages. She paused, looking directly at the Versith ambassador. Before I respond to these accusations, I would like to ask the distinguished representative of the Versith Confederation a simple question. Tzkel's tentacles dimmed slightly in surprise. Ambassador Tzkel, Elena said, stepping forward on her platform so that everyone in the chamber could see her clearly. When was the last time your people faced extinction? The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. No one had expected this approach. The Versith ambassador's tentacles pulsed in confusion. I do not understand the relevance of this question, he responded. I believe you do, said Elena, her voice growing stronger. But allow me to make it clear to everyone present. She pressed a button on her console, and her own set of holographic images appeared around the chamber. These showed Earth's history from a different perspective. Cities rebuilt after natural disasters, medical teams fighting pandemics, scientists working to reverse climate damage, and colonies established on harsh, unforgiving planets. You call humans war-fearing, Elena said, her eyes now blazing with emotion. As if it were an insult. But I stand before you today to declare that you are absolutely right. The chamber fell completely silent, all attention focused on the human ambassador, as she prepared to deliver her response. Yes, we are war-fearing, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. And it is precisely because we fear war that we prepare for it. The chamber remained silent. No delegate had expected this admission. In our brief time as members of this council, we have noticed something strange, Elena said, walking slowly around her platform. You speak of peace as if it were the natural state of the universe, as if it required no protection, no vigilance. She gestured to the images still, floating around the chamber, the pictures the Versith had shown of Earth's military history. You showed these as evidence of our barbarism. Let me show you what you missed. Elena tapped her console again. New images appeared, showing the aftermath of conflicts, humans rebuilding cities, treating wounded enemies, signing peace treaties. Each of these wars taught us something. They taught us the terrible cost of conflict, the value of preparedness, and most importantly, they taught us that peace must be defended. Ambassador Tzkel's tentacles flickered with irritation. Your point, Ambassador Reyes? Are you suggesting that the Council doesn't understand peace? Many species here haven't engaged in warfare for thousands of years. Elena nodded. Exactly. My point, Ambassador. You haven't needed to fight because your worlds are deep within safe territories. You haven't faced extinction-level threats. You haven't had to make the hard choices. Murmurs of disagreement rippled through the chamber. The Tyranny representative clicked her mandibles loudly. Humans mistake readiness for aggression, Elena said, raising her voice slightly. You who have known only peace cannot comprehend what it means to fight for survival. She pressed another button on her console. A new series of images appeared. These were not from Earth's history. These were recent. 3 standard months ago. The agricultural colony on Proxima Centauri B, a peaceful settlement with minimal defenses. The images showed a small human colony world. Farms, small towns, schools. Then the images changed to show the same colony under attack by sleek black ships, buildings burning, people running. Raiders from the unaligned worlds struck without warning. They wanted our food stores and technology. Elena let the images play, showing the destruction. 2 days later, the images shifted to show human military vessels arriving. Marines in combat armor deploying to the surface. Battles in the streets and skies. Our response force arrived. Not fast enough to prevent losses, but in time to save most of the colony. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegate. 16 children died in that attack, 43 civilians. Do you know what the raiders said when we captured them? They said they chose our colony because most other Council species worlds were too heavily defended. Shocked whispers filled the chamber. But that's not in any Council report, the Meridian speaker objected. No, Elena agreed. Because we handled it ourselves. We didn't bring it to the Council because, frankly, we knew what the response would be. More debate. More discussions about peaceful solutions. While our people died. She tapped her console again. New footage appeared, this time showing attacks on other species' colonies. Small settlements on distant worlds being raided or destroyed. These attacks happened in the past 5 years. Settlements belonging to Council members. Most of you don't even know about them because they were too small, too distant for your central governments to notice or care about. The Zalaxian representatives. Hologram flickered angrily. Where did you get this footage? This is internal security information. From the survivors, Elena said simply. Those who managed to escape came to human colonies seeking help. We gave them sanctuary. She walked to the center of her platform, standing tall. You call us war-fearing as if it were shameful, but our fear of war doesn't paralyze us, it prepares us. While many Council species pretend that violence doesn't exist, we face it honestly. Elena gestured to another set of images, these showing human ships protecting not just human colonies, but settlements of other species as well. In the past 3 years, human defense forces have responded to 28 distress calls from non-human colonies in the outer sectors. Colonies that their own governments had left virtually undefended, believing that Council membership alone would protect them. The chamber was completely silent now. Many delegates were checking their own data terminals, confirming Elena's claims. You criticize us for conducting war games, Elena continued. Those exercises developed the rapid response protocols that saved thousands of lives, not just human lives, when the Krell swarm passed through Sector 12 last year. She let that sink in. The Krell incident had been downplayed in Council reports as a minor incursion, but everyone knew it could have been catastrophic. The weapons you fear? They've defended your shipping lanes against pirates. The soldiers we train? They've evacuated your citizens from disaster zones when your own ships were too far away. Elena's voice softened slightly but remained firm. Your pacifism isn't virtue. It's privilege. A privilege purchased with the readiness of others to act when diplomacy fails. Ambassador Tskel's tentacles had darkened to a deep indigo, a sign of distress among his kind. You mischaracterize our position, Ambassador Reyes, he said. The Council values security. We simply believe there are better ways to achieve it than through military buildup. Like what? Elena challenged. Like the private security corporations that many of you secretly hire to protect your interests in dangerous regions? The same corporations that employ soldiers from unaligned worlds because your own citizens have forgotten how to fight? Gasps echoed through the chamber. This was not something openly discussed in Council sessions. Or perhaps you mean the policy of abandonment. The practice of simply writing off colonies that are too difficult to defend, calling them unauthorized settlements after they're attacked? Elena shook her head sadly. Humans haven't forgotten the harsh truth that the universe teaches any species that wishes to survive. Peace is not the absence of violence. Peace is the successful defense against it. She turned to face the Council speaker directly. You want to sanction Earth for building defenses? Go ahead. But know this, we will continue to protect our people, and we will continue to answer distress calls from any ship or settlement, regardless of species, regardless of politics, because that's who we are. The speaker was about to respond, when emergency lights flashed throughout the chamber. A communication. Officer rushed to the speaker's platform, whispering urgently. The speaker's blue skin paled to a light azure. He looked up, his expression grave. "Council session suspended," he announced, his voice shaking slightly. "We have just received a distress signal from the Eloth homeworld. They report they are under attack by unknown forces. The situation appears catastrophic." All eyes turned to the Eloth representative, a tall, willowy being with translucent skin. The Eloth were among the oldest council members, renowned for their complete disarmament centuries ago. The Eloth ambassador was staring at his communication device in horror. He looked up, his large eyes filled with fear. "They're calling themselves the Korvash," he whispered. "A species we thought extinct for 3 centuries. They've already breached our orbital defenses." The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates demanded information, offered sympathies, or simply sat in shock. Elena stood silently on her platform, watching the panic spread through the council. Then she activated her communication link to Earth, Fleet Command. "This is Ambassador Reyes," she said quietly. "What's the position of our nearest combat-ready force relative to the Eloth system?" The answer came quickly. "The 7th Fleet is concluding exercises in the Tau Ceti system. Approximately 40 minutes jump time to Eloth." Elena nodded. "Put them on standby. I'll be in touch shortly." She closed the link and turned her attention back to the chaotic council chamber, her decision already made. The council chamber had transformed from an orderly assembly into a scene of confusion. Delegates huddled in groups, speaking urgently with their home governments. The massive holographic display at the center of the room now showed the Eloth homeworld, Elothia, with multiple red markers indicating attack sites. The Eloth ambassador, Vental, stood frozen at his platform. His translucent skin had turned almost completely white with fear. The Eloth were philosophers and artists who had dismantled their military centuries ago, believing that advanced civilizations had no need for weapons. The council speaker raised, his hands trying to restore order. "Please, delegates, we must coordinate our response according to council emergency protocols." Elena watched as senior council members gathered around the speaker's platform. She knew what would happen next. Hours of discussion, careful consideration of legal implications, and eventually, a carefully worded condemnation of the attack with minimal actual assistance. Meanwhile, billions of Eloth would die. She pushed her way through the crowd to reach the speaker's platform. "Mr. Speaker," she said firmly, "Earth's 7th Fleet is less than an hour away from the Eloth system. I'm prepared to order them to respond immediately." The speaker looked shocked. "Ambassador Reyes, there are procedures for this kind of situation. The council must first assess." "There's no time for assessment," Elena interrupted. "The Eloth have no defenses. How many will die while the council debates?" The Versith ambassador Tizkel moved his large body between Elena and the speaker. "This is exactly what we were discussing earlier," he said, his tentacles pulsing bright orange with emotion. "Humans are always eager to rush into conflict. This is a council matter, not a human one." Elena looked past him to the Eloth ambassador. "Ambassador Vental, would you accept human assistance?" The Eloth's large, luminous eyes blinked rapidly. We have no defensive capabilities. Our orbital stations are already destroyed. Millions are dying." His voice trembled. "Yes, we accept any help you can provide." That was all Elena needed. She activated her communication link. "This is Ambassador Reyes to Earth Fleet Command. The Eloth have formally requested assistance. Direct the 7th Fleet to jump to the Eloth system immediately. Full combat authorization." "Understood, Ambassador," came the quick reply. 7th Fleet, jumping in 3 minutes. The speaker's blue skin darkened with anger. "You've overstepped your authority, Ambassador. Council regulations clearly state that military intervention in member worlds requires full council approval." "Then approve it," Elena snapped, "or override my order. But be quick about it. Human ships will be entering combat in less than an hour." The council chamber fell silent. No one had ever seen a junior member challenge the council leadership so directly. The speaker looked around at the other senior members, then sighed. We will not override your order, Ambassador Reyes, but be warned. If this escalates the conflict, Earth will bear full responsibility. Elena nodded grimly. We accept that responsibility. Now let's focus on helping the Eloth. The main display now showed human warships jumping into space near Eloth. The 7th Fleet wasn't the largest in Earth's navy, but it was one of the most experienced, 12 battleships, 24 cruisers, and numerous smaller vessels. Against an unknown enemy force, it was impossible to know if it would be enough. Display feeds from the human vessels, the speaker ordered. The chamber's holographic system linked with the human ships, showing multiple views of the battle zone. The council delegates gasped collectively at what they saw. The Corvash fleet was massive, easily 3 times larger than the human force. Their ships were strange, organic-looking constructs that moved with unnatural speed. Several Eloth cities were already burning, visible from orbit as bright spots on the night side of the planet. Attention, unknown vessels, came the voice of the human fleet commander, Admiral Chen. This is the Earth Alliance 7th Fleet. You are attacking a protected world. Cease all hostile actions and withdraw immediately, or we will open fire. The Corvash response came in the form of several energy beams that lanced out toward the human ships. All vessels, combat formation Delta, Admiral Chen ordered calmly. Focus fire on their lead ships. Cruiser groups 2 and 3 move to protect the civilian evacuation zones. The chamber watched in stunned silence as the human fleet engaged. Despite being outnumbered, the Earth ships moved with practiced precision, concentrating their fire and using coordinated maneuvers to protect each other. Their strategy appears sound, commented a Xylaxian military analyst who had been summoned to the chamber. But the odds are not favorable. Their technology is significantly less advanced than the Corvash weaponry. Elena said nothing, but her hands gripped the railing of the platform tightly. Each of those ships carried hundreds of human crew members, people who were now fighting and dying for a species they had never even met. On the display, a human cruiser took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire. There was no cheer from the Corvash, no celebration of their kill, just silent, relentless attack. The Corvash were believed extinct, said the Meridian speaker quietly. They were one of the few species ever expelled from the Council, over 3 centuries ago, for extreme aggression and refusal to accept peaceful coexistence. And you didn't think this information might be relevant to share with newer Council members? Elena asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. It was ancient history, the speaker replied. Or so we thought. The battle continued to unfold on the displays. Human ships were taking heavy damage, but they were inflicting losses on the Corvash as well. More importantly, they had positioned themselves between the attackers and the largest Eloth population centers, buying time for evacuations. A communication came through from Admiral Chen. We've identified a weakness in their shield configuration. Adjusting targeting parameters. All ships, focus fire on the designated coordinates when they come into range. The Council delegates watched as the human fleet suddenly changed tactics, concentrating all firepower on specific points of the Corvash vessels. Several enemy ships began to break apart under the assault. They adapted, whispered the Xylaxian analyst, sounding impressed despite himself. They identified a weakness and exploited it in minutes. That's what humans do, Elena said quietly. We adapt. We survive. We protect. On another display, Eloth evacuation ships were rising from the surface filled with civilians. The human cruisers moved to escort them, taking hits meant for the unarmed vessels. Ambassador Reyes called Admiral Chen through the communication. Lincoln, we're holding them back from the main cities, but we need reinforcements. The Corvash fleet is larger than our initial scans indicated. Elena turned to the Council. Well, will the Council send ships to assist, or will humans fight alone? The speaker looked uncomfortable. Most Council species have limited military forces, and those that exist would take hours or days to mobilize. So that's a no, Elena interrupted. She turned back to her communication link. Admiral, this is Ambassador Reyes. I'm authorizing the deployment of the 3rd and 5th Fleets. To your position, hold on until they arrive. Understood, Ambassador, we'll hold. The confidence in the Admiral's voice was unwavering, even though everyone in the chamber could see the desperate situation the Seventh Fleet faced. Elena looked around at the Council delegates, many of whom watched the battle with expressions of shock and horror. Few of them had ever witnessed actual combat. "While you debate, humans act," she said, her voice carrying through the quiet chamber. "This is what it means to be war-fearing, not war-loving. We understand war's cost intimately enough to know when it's necessary." A massive explosion lit up the display as one of the largest human battleships positioned itself directly in the path of a Corvash energy beam aimed at a Neloth evacuation ship. The human vessel broke apart, its sacrifice saving thousands of Eloth civilians. Silent tears ran down the face of the Eloth ambassador as he watched. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why would they die for us? We've never even had diplomatic relations with Earth." Elena's expression was solemn. "Because that's what humans do, Ambassador. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We face the darkness so others don't have to." She turned back to the display, watching as her people fought and died in a battle that until an hour ago wasn't even theirs. "And this," she said, as much to herself as to the chamber, "is why we prepare for war. Because when it comes, and it always comes, someone must be ready to fight." The footage from the battle for Eloth became the most watched broadcast across thousands of worlds. Never before had so many Council species witnessed actual combat on this scale. For many, it was their first time seeing the reality of war beyond historical records or entertainment. In the Council chamber, delegates who had been so quick to condemn humanity's aggressive nature just hours earlier now watched in stunned silence as human ships fought and died to protect a species they barely knew. "Cruiser Dauntless is hit. They've lost engine power," called out a tactical officer's voice over the communication channel. On the main display, a human cruiser drifted helplessly as 3 Corvash vessels closed in for the kill. But before they could finish it off, 2 smaller human ships, destroyers, moved into position, placing themselves between the damaged cruiser and the enemy. "Destroyers Saber and Defender taking defensive position," reported Admiral Chen. "Evacuation shuttles from Dauntless are away. Cover those shuttles at all costs." The smaller ships took devastating hits meant for their larger companion, their shields flaring and failing under the assault. Yet they held position, firing continuously to keep the enemy at bay until the evacuation shuttles were clear. "Those smaller vessels cannot survive such an attack," observed the Zylaxian analyst. "They are sacrificing themselves." "Notice their tactics," Elena said, pointing to the display. "They're not just fighting to destroy the enemy. Every move, every position is calculated to protect Eloth's civilian evacuation zones." It was true. The human fleet had formed a protective barrier around key Eloth cities, prioritizing the defense of evacuation routes over tactically advantageous positions. They were taking heavier losses because of it, but they were saving millions of Eloth lives. "New contacts detecting jumping into the system," announced a Council technician. "Multiple signatures. It's the human reinforcements." The chamber watched as dozens of new ships appeared at the edge of the system, Earth's 3rd and 5th fleets arriving together. Unlike the 7th Fleet, which had been on training exercises, these ships were fully equipped for war. "This changes the equation," the Zylaxian analyst noted. "The human forces now nearly match the Corvash in number, though still not in technology." Admiral Chen's voice came through again, stronger now. "All fleet commanders, this is Chen. We've identified 3 vulnerabilities in Corvash ship design. Transmitting targeting data now. 3rd Fleet, take position to protect the southern hemisphere. 5th Fleet, move to secure orbital space around the capital. 7th will continue to hold the line here." The newly arrived human ships moved with precision, sliding into formation and immediately engaging the enemy. The tide of battle began to shift. "Admiral," called out a sensor officer, "we're detecting unusual energy readings from the Corvash flagship. They appear to be charging some kind of main weapon." All eyes in the Council chamber focused on the largest Corvash vessel. It was massive, nearly twice the size of the largest human battleship. Its center was beginning to glow with an ominous green light. Analysis suggests it's a planet-killer weapon, reported a human science officer. If it fires at full power, at the planet's surface, the implications were clear. Millions of Eloth would die instantly. All available ships focus fire on the Corvash flagship, ordered Admiral Chen. We must prevent that weapon from discharging. Human vessels broke formation, racing toward the Corvash flagship. They took heavy fire, several exploding as they charged forward, but they kept coming, concentrating all weapons on the enemy's main vessel. It's not enough, whispered the Xylaxian analyst. Their weapons cannot penetrate the flagship's shields in time. Elena watched, her heart pounding, as her people fought desperately to prevent a catastrophe. Then she saw one of the human battleships, the Resolute, change course. Resolute, what are you doing? Demanded Admiral Chen. Sir, our weapons can't break through in time, came the reply from the Resolute's captain. But a direct matter-antimatter core breach inside their shield perimeter will. It's the only way. The meaning became clear to everyone watching. The human battleship was setting a collision course with the Corvash flagship, planning to detonate its own power core. Captain Lewis, there are 1,500 people on your ship, Chen said, his voice tight. And there are millions on the planet below, sir. Resolute crew is taking to escape pods now. I'm staying to ensure delivery. In the council chamber, delegates watched in disbelief as the massive human battleship accelerated toward the Corvash flagship, escape pods launching from its sides. This is not logical, stammered a Meridian delegate. The captain is sacrificing himself? To save billions, Elena replied softly. This is humanity, counselor. This is who we are. On the display, the Resolute slammed into the Corvash, flagship at tremendous speed, piercing its shields through sheer kinetic force. A moment later, a blinding flash lit up space as the human ship's power core detonated. When the light faded, the Corvash flagship was breaking apart. Its planet-killer weapon never fired. A cheer erupted from the human fleet communications, but it was short-lived. Multiple new contacts, called out a sensor officer. Second Corvash fleet jumping in. The chamber fell silent again. Despite their victory against the first wave, the human forces were now damaged and depleted. The arrival of a fresh enemy fleet would almost certainly mean defeat. Admiral Chen, Elena said, opening her communication channel. Status report? Chen's voice was steady despite the dire situation. We've lost 38% of our ships, many more damaged. We've evacuated approximately 60% of the Eloth population from major cities. But against a fresh Corvash fleet, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Elena looked around the council chamber, at the faces of delegates who had watched humans fight and die to protect a member world. Well, she demanded, will the council finally act to protect its own? The speaker hesitated. As I explained, most council species have limited military capabilities. Those that do have defense forces would need time to mobilize. The Tirani Collective has a defense fleet stationed 3 jumps from Eloth, interrupted the Tirani delegate, her mandibles clicking rapidly. They have been on standby since we received news of the attack. The Xylaxian Union also has military vessels within range, added the Xylaxian representative. Our commanders await orders. One by one, delegates stepped forward, offering what military assets they had. Many were small, some were outdated, but together they represented something unprecedented, a unified council military response. The speaker looked stunned. This is highly irregular. There are protocols. There's no time for protocols, said the Eloth ambassador, his voice finding strength for the first time. My people are dying. The humans have shown us what it means to act rather than merely discuss. I formally request immediate military assistance from all council members. The speaker looked around, saw the determination on the faces of the delegates, and nodded. Very well. All available council military forces are directed to jump to the Eloth system and place themselves under the tactical command of... He paused, then continued, "Under the command of Admiral Chen of Earth." Elena felt a surge of hope. It might not be enough, but they would not fight alone anymore. On the main display, the first council ships began to appear. Tarani hive ships, sleek Xylaxian cruisers, and vessels of a dozen other designs, all moving to join the battered human fleet as the second wave of Corvash attackers approached. "This is Admiral Chen to all allied vessels," came the human commander's voice, betraying no surprise at his sudden command of a multi-species fleet. "Form up according to Tactical Plan Gamma 6. Unknown vessels, transmit your capabilities and we'll find the best place for you in the formation." As the disparate ships began to organize into a coherent defense force, Elena turned to the Verzith ambassador, whose tentacles had darkened to a deep blue, a sign of deep emotion among his kind. "Still think we're too war-fearing, Ambassador Tizkel?" she asked quietly. The massive alien's voice was subdued. Perhaps we have been peace-loving for so long that we forgot the price of that peace." He looked at the display, where human and council ships now formed a united front. "Your people remind us of what we once knew but chose to forget?" Elena nodded, her eyes returning to the battle display. "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing," she quoted softly. An ancient human saying. Today we chose to do something. As the combined fleet engaged the second wave of Corvash ships, the council chamber fell silent once more, watching as species that had never fought together now stood united against a common threat, following the lead of the humans they had condemned just hours before. 3 days after the battle began, it was finally over. The combined forces of Earth and the Council had driven the Corvash from the Eloth system, but at tremendous cost. Nearly 40% of the human fleet had been destroyed, thousands of human lives lost. The Council forces arriving later had suffered fewer casualties, but their losses were still significant. The council chamber was unnaturally quiet as reports came in. The grand space that had once felt imposing now seemed hollow, as if the EUA reality of war had stripped away its magnificence. Elena Reyes stood at her platform, reviewing casualty lists on her datapad. Each name represented a person, someone with family, friends, hopes and dreams, who had died defending a world that wasn't their own. Her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but she stood straight, her posture unwavering. The speaker called the session to order. "The Council extends its deepest gratitude to all forces who participated in the defense of Eloth," he began formally. "Special recognition must be given to Earth, whose immediate response saved millions of Eloth lives." Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. Many delegates who had been critical of humanity now looked at Elena with newfound respect. "Ambassador Reyes," the speaker continued, "would you care to address the council?" Elena nodded and walked to the center of the chamber. She carried a small device in her hand. Without speaking, she placed it on the floor and activated it. A holographic display sprang to life, filling the chamber with thousands of faces, human men and women in military uniforms, their pictures floating around the delegates. "These are the fallen," Elena said quietly. 3,742 human lives lost in the Battle of Eloth. The chamber was completely silent. The faces continued to appear, each one looking out at the assembled delegates. Captain Michael Chen of the destroyer Saber, who placed his ship between Corvash weapons and an Eloth evacuation transport. He left behind a wife and 2 children. She pointed to another face. Lieutenant Sarah Okafor, pilot. She flew 36 consecutive hours, evacuating Eloth civilians. Her shuttle was shot down on her final run. She was 24 years old. Another face. Commander James Wu of the battleship Resolute. He stayed aboard to ensure his ship struck the Corvash flagship, saving the capital city from destruction. He was to be married next month. Elena walked slowly around the chamber, letting the delegates see the faces of the dead. "Look at them," she commanded. These weren't warriors born. They were farmers, teachers, engineers who trained to fight, because history taught us someone must. She stopped in front of the Verzith ambassador, whose tentacles were now a deep, sorrowful purple, These are the people you called warmongering primitives just days ago, Ambassador. These are the people who died so that others might live. The Versith said nothing, his massive head bowed in what appeared to be shame. Elena returned to the center of the chamber. The human race does not glorify war. We do not seek it, but we recognize its sometimes terrible necessity. She deactivated the holographic display, the faces of the fallen fading away. Now there is something else the council needs to see. Elena nodded to a human technician who had been admitted to the chamber. The main display activated, showing a series of encrypted communications that had been recovered from the Corvash flagship. Our intelligence teams managed to decrypt these messages from the Corvash command network, Elena explained. What they found was disturbing. The display showed translation of the alien text. Several delegates gasped as they read the content. These communications prove that the Corvash weren't extinct, Elena continued. They were in hibernation in deep space. More importantly, certain members of the council knew about their survival for decades. Shocked murmurs spread through the chamber. The names of those council members are highlighted in these documents, Elena said, her voice hard. They concealed the information about Corvash survival because acknowledging the threat would have disrupted trade agreements and economic forecasts. The chamber erupted in angry shouts as delegates demanded explanations. The speaker tried unsuccessfully to restore order. "Silence!" roared a voice that cut through the chaos. All eyes turned to the source, the Eloth ambassador, Ven Tal. The normally gentle, soft-spoken diplomat stood rigid with anger, his translucent skin flushed dark with emotion. "My people have paid the price for this deception," he said, his voice trembling. 8 million Eloth dead. Our oldest cities destroyed, our history erased, all because some among you feared economic disruption more than you valued truth. The accusation hung in the air. Several senior council members looked away, unable to meet the Eloth's gaze. "Your fear of war became fear of truth," Elena said, her rage now cold and focused. "You sacrificed vigilance for comfort, and others paid the price." The speaker finally managed to restore some order. "These are serious accusations that must be investigated fully," he said, his voice less confident than before. "A special committee will be formed to—" "No more committees," interrupted the Tirani delegate, her mandibles clicking rapidly. "No more delays. Those responsible must be removed from the council immediately." Agreement came from around the chamber. The mood had shifted dramatically from days earlier. The delegates who had been so quick to judge humanity now turned their judgment on their own leadership. The speaker, recognizing the mood of the chamber, nodded reluctantly. "Very well. Those named in the documents will be suspended pending a full investigation." Several senior council members were immediately escorted from the chamber by security forces. Their departure was met with grim satisfaction by the remaining delegates. When order was restored, the speaker turned back to Elena. "Ambassador Reyes, Earth's actions in this crisis have been illuminating for the Council. The sanctions proposed against your world are, of course, withdrawn." Elena nodded, but said nothing. This wasn't about political victories. The Eloth ambassador approached her platform. "My people owe yours a debt we can never repay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The Eloth formally request a permanent defensive alliance with Earth. We wish to learn from you, not how to love war, but how to be prepared for it." Similar requests came from other delegates, particularly those representing younger or more vulnerable species who had long relied on council protection that had proven inadequate. The speaker looked troubled by this development. "The council has always maintained collective security arrangements. Individual defensive pacts between member worlds are unprecedented." Elena looked at him steadily. "Perhaps it's time for new precedents, Mr. Speaker. The universe has proven more dangerous than the Council was willing to admit." She turned to address the entire chamber. "Earth is willing to share our defensive knowledge with any world that asks, not to spread conflict, but to ensure peace through preparedness. Because the hard truth is this: peace isn't maintained by pretending threats don't exist. It's maintained by being ready to face them when they appear." The Xylaxian military analyst who had been observing the battle from the chamber stepped forward. The human tactics and adaptability were impressive. Their willingness to sacrifice for others, even more so. The Xylaxian Union would benefit from such knowledge. One by one, delegates rose to express similar sentiments. The council was changing before Elena's eyes, moving from complacent idealism to pragmatic reality. As the session concluded, the speaker approached Elena privately. "You've changed the council today, Ambassador Reyes. For better or worse remains to be seen." Elena looked at him tiredly. "We didn't want to change you, Mr. Speaker. We just wanted you to see the galaxy as it truly is, not as you wish it to be." She glanced down at her datapad, still displaying the faces of the fallen. "My people paid a heavy price for that lesson. I hope the council remembers it." 3 months had passed since the Battle of Eloth. The majestic spires of the Eloth capital city, once shattered by Corvash bombardment, were slowly being rebuilt. Human engineers worked alongside Eloth architects, combining Earth's practical experience in post-war reconstruction with Eloth's artistic vision. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human military advisors now worked with dozens of species that had previously disdained primitive human warfare. Training centers had been established on 27 worlds, teaching everything from basic defense tactics to advanced planetary shield technologies. The Galactic Council itself had undergone dramatic changes. The revealed conspiracy had led to the removal of 7 senior members. The new leadership was younger, more practical, and significantly more respectful of humanity's perspective. Elena Reyes stood on her platform in the council chamber, watching the delegates file in for this historic session. She looked different from the diplomat who had stood in this same spot 3 months earlier. Her posture was still straight, her gaze still direct, but there was a new weight to her presence, the weight of respect earned through sacrifice. The chamber itself had been modified. Where once the platforms had been arranged in a hierarchy based on seniority, they now formed a circle of equals. At the center of the chamber, a memorial had been installed, a simple holographic flame that displayed the names of all who had fallen in the Battle of Eloth, regardless of species. The new council speaker, a Tyranni whose swift action during the crisis had earned her the position, called the session to order. "Today marks a significant moment in council history," she began, her mandibles moving precisely. "Ambassador Elena Reyes of Earth will present what has been called the Vigilance Doctrine, a new framework for galactic security. Ambassador, you have the floor." Elena moved to the center of the chamber. The datapad in her hand contained the culmination of 3 months of intense work, a complete reimagining of how the council approached defense and security. "Thank you, Speaker," Elena said, her voice clear and strong. 3 months ago, we gathered in this chamber as the Corvash attacked Eloth. In the aftermath of that tragedy, we made a promise. Never again would we allow complacency to threaten innocent lives. She activated the main display, showing a simplified version of the doctrine. "The Vigilance Doctrine is built on 3 principles," Elena continued. "First, transparent information sharing. No threat, no matter how politically inconvenient, should ever be concealed from council members." The delegates nodded in agreement. The revelation that some had known about the Corvash had shaken the council to its core. Second, distributed defense responsibility. Every member world must maintain basic defensive capabilities proportional to their resources and technology. No world should be completely defenseless, relying solely on distant council protection. This had been the most controversial aspect during the planning stages. Many species had long traditions of pacifism, but the Eloth, once the strongest advocates for complete disarmament, were now the strongest supporters of this principle. And third, Elena said, mutual defense commitment. An attack on one council world is an attack on all. No member should ever face threats alone. She lowered her datapad and looked around the chamber. "Humans don't love war," she explained to the assembled delegates. "We simply refuse to be destroyed by those who do. This doctrine isn't about militarizing the galaxy. It's about ensuring that peaceful civilizations can remain peaceful through strength, rather than vulnerability. The Eloth ambassador, Vental, rose to speak. His people had suffered the most in the Corvash attack, with nearly 8 million dead and their oldest cities destroyed. Yet they had also learned the most. 3 months ago, I would have opposed this doctrine without hesitation, he said, his voice gentle but firm. My people believed that perfect peace required perfect disarmament. We were wrong. He gestured to the human engineers who had helped rebuild his world. Our human friends have taught us that there is a difference between loving peace and being prepared to defend it. The Eloth fully support the vigilance doctrine. Support came from around the chamber. Even the Versith, who had led the criticism against humanity, now stood firmly in favor. Ambassador Tskel's tentacles glowed a respectful blue as he addressed the chamber. My people misjudged humans, he admitted. We saw their readiness for conflict as evidence of a primitive mindset. We now understand it as wisdom born of hard experience. Elena nodded in acknowledgement of his words. The relationship between humans and Versith had improved dramatically in recent months, with Versith scientists now working closely with human military strategists to develop new defensive technologies. The speaker called for the vote. One by one, the delegates registered their positions. When the final tally appeared, it was nearly unanimous. The vigilance doctrine was adopted as official council policy. As part of the new doctrine, a galactic defense force was established. The first true multi-species military in council history. Command positions were distributed based on experience and ability, rather than political considerations, with many human officers serving in key roles. After the session concluded, Elena stood by the large viewing window that overlooked the council planet's capital city. The speaker joined her there. A remarkable achievement, Ambassador Reyes, the Tyranni said. In just 3 months, you've transformed how the council approaches security. Elena shook her head slightly. Not me. The 3,742 humans who died defending Eloth did that. I just gave voice to their sacrifice. Either way, the speaker replied, the galaxy is safer for it. The latest intelligence reports suggest the Corvash are retreating to the outer regions, away from council space. They attacked expecting easy prey and found a united defense instead. Elena nodded. The Corvash had been driven back, but they weren't destroyed. Humanity's war-fearing nature, the very quality they had been criticized for, meant they wouldn't make the mistake of assuming the threat was gone forever. As Elena prepared to leave the chamber, she was approached by a group of young delegates from various species. They were members of the first training cohort for the new Galactic Defense Force. Ambassador, said a young Xylaxian officer, we wanted to thank you. Many of us grew up believing that maintaining peace meant avoiding all conflict. You've shown us there's another way. Elena smiled at them. The future defenders of a more vigilant galaxy. Peace through strength isn't a new idea for humans, she said, but it's one we've learned through painful experience. If the Council can learn it, without paying the same price, then every human life lost at Eloth was worth it. Later that evening, Elena sat alone in her office composing a message to Earth. The holographic displays around her showed the progress of various defense training programs across Council space. What had begun as a crisis had transformed into an opportunity, a chance to build a truly secure galaxy. She finished her message with a simple request. Send the historians. The galaxy is finally ready to learn. As she sent the transmission, Elena looked out at the stars visible from her window. Humanity had come to the Galactic Council hoping to find peaceful allies among the stars. Instead, they had found civilizations that had forgotten the price of peace. Now those same civilizations looked to humans not for technology or resources, but for something far more valuable, the wisdom to face uncomfortable truths and the courage to act on them. The Council had called humans war-fearing, meaning it as an insult. They had been right about the fear, but wrong about what it meant. Humans didn't fear war because they were primitive or aggressive. They feared it because they understood its cost, and were willing to pay that cost when necessary to protect others. That understanding, painfully earned across centuries of human conflict, was now humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy.